All right. Okay, it looks like we're live. Hey everyone, happy Sunday. Thanks for coming in. Welcome to the session. Hope you're all well. Hope everyone is safe and healthy and happy this Sunday. So here we are for, I think we're in the 20s now. I think we're in our 21st or 22nd live Sacred Space session. And I just want to say welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this session. As always, I'm honored to be here with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you in our sacred space together today. So the things we're going to do today is, as I do every week, I'll set sacred space. And then we'll talk about an overall topic. And our topic today will be the power of the artist archetype. Power of the artist archetype. We'll have a bit of discussion. Gowrie will join us for the discussion. We may have a bit of a story put in there. And we'll have an exercise to suggest between now and the next session. This is going to be a bit of a looser session because we've been thinking about how to bringing in different kinds of formats for this time slot, because we have the intention of, given the feedback of everyone, to continue doing these sessions on an ongoing basis, even after the pandemic is over, whatever that ends up meaning. And then after that, we will close sacred space, and we will send you on your way. Okay. So to set sacred space, I'll just say that we would like to, together, all of us, have a space here together, which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we choose to define that. A safe sanctuary space for us to all relax and surrender with no danger or threat around us, emotionally, spiritually, physically. And the reason we want to do this is so that we can partake of the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And so in opening sacred space today, I am proposing that we follow the principles of the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. The first is confidentiality. And now this is online, and the video is being recorded and all the rest of it. So the way we do confidentiality here is that if you wish to make a comment or participate anonymously, you would come onto Crowdcast, you would register, and then you would go to edit profile and just change your username to Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter, and then come back and participate. And that's totally all right. The second principle is that we will observe the principle of there being no threat or controlling, no intervention, no fixing, no tough love, no giving advice, basically. And the idea here is that we are intending to hold space for each other, to be however we happen to find ourselves, right? To be afraid, to be anxious, to be happy, to be relaxed, to be enjoying ourselves in this time, and to feel awkward and embarrassed that we actually are doing somewhat okay. To be in very dire straits and to feel, ashamed of that or no shame, however you are, right? There is this space here that we hold online every week where you can actually be however you are, with no fear of someone coming in and saying, now there, shush now, or trying to control or intervene to bring you from point A to point B. If you find yourself at point A, you just sit at point A. And so that being said, there's nothing wrong with intervening, recommending a book, saying, oh, you should go do this or try this exercise or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But because that, is of the realm of fear, threat, and control. I mean, even if I recommend a book, the implication is if you don't read the book I recommend, you may not get the result you're looking for. And that's a subtle kind of fear, threat, and control, right? So we don't do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But because that's fear, threat, and control, that belongs in the realm of the profane, which is like 99% of our waking experience in modern life. And the idea of being in an hour or two of sacred where that kind of thing simply doesn't happen. It's okay that it happens elsewhere. It doesn't happen here. And there is a quality of the space. There's a quality of the lived experience when we don't do that. And then we kind of make a little, deal with each other for the next hour or two that we won't do that. That allows you to kind of sink into a different kind of mode. That's hard to describe, but that is we find it to be intrinsically nourishing. So we decide to get together once a week and do that. So that's principle 2. No fear, threat, controlling, no fixing, no tough love, nothing, no tough love for your own good. And then the third and fourth principles are corollaries of that one. So the third is no commerce. Nothing may be sold. I can't sell you anything or recommended or suggested. About a month ago, we moved the Q&A session. Every few weeks, we would do a Q&A session. I moved that to outside of sacred space because people would ask about like programs that I give and everything. And I just, I want to enjoy sacred space too. So we moved the Q&A out of sacred space. We're here for your energy, not for the things you bring. In other words, we're here for what you are, right? Not for what you do or provide. For you as an end in and of yourself, not as a means to another end. Okay. And the fourth is there's no expectation of participation. There's no pressure to do anything. Again, the nourishment comes from held space of your presence and attention. But there's enough of us here where we do that. If a few of you, come and go as you please, check your phones, get distracted, the kids are calling you, the spouse is calling you, that's all right. You come and go as you please. If you need to come back and watch the replay, that's all okay, because there's no fear, threat, and control. Right? You do what you need to do. The nourishment, again, comes from the held space, your presence and attention, from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us together will tend to deliciously amplify that. Okay. And so this is what I will propose. And if you are not okay with that, we will give you a moment now to withdraw from the group. And we'll just catch up with you later in the profane space and still hang out. We're all still friends. No worries at all. In other words, what I'm saying is there's no fear, threat, or control even about wanting you to stay in sacred space. It's you just come and go as you please because it's sacred space. Okay. So I'll give you a moment to dial that in and make your decision. Okay. And so for the rest of us, we will now move together forward into sacred space. And here again, the principles we will all observe and honor in each other is confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. Okay. So here we are in sacred space. This is one of the best parts of my week. And my weeks have been pretty good. So that's saying a lot. So the topic we want to talk about today is the power of the artist archetype. Now, after our last two sessions where we talked about manifestation, we've had a number of questions about the specific archetypes that have been mentioned here and there, in particular, the artist archetype. And what we want to do today, we want to try something new. We want to try a kind of new session style where we will just take a single archetype and just kick the ball around. We'll discuss it in more depth. Because, I think in doing these sessions, one of the things I liked, there's so many, boxes we're checking, bases we're covering with this one sort of time slot every week of Sacred Space sessions. And one of the things I'd like to try to get done in these sessions every now and then is to give you more of a flavor of these different archetypes. And so the idea is, instead of just talking in general terms about what an archetype is, which we've done in the past, and then saying, an artist and warrior and queen and crone, to take one specific example and dive in a bit and reflect on that. Talk about the physics, talk about the examples in different people's lives. And then, we get to learn the physics of archetype itself. Right, I could say, well, there's this thing called food, right? And this is what it does, and in theory, how it works. But then to go out and start tasting, Japanese food, Thai food, French food, to basically get an understanding of, filling out the experience of this abstract thing called food. So there's this abstract thing called archetype, and we want to dive into some specific, sort of realms of that. The feeling of a certain archetype, the action, the reaction, the call and response pattern of engaging with an archetype, both that we find within us and also that we find outside of us in the external world as a reflection of archetype within us. Okay. And over time, it would be cool to accrete a bit of a library of different archetypes, videos that we can use for other things too. Okay. All right, and so to do this then, I want to have a co-discussion with my editor, Gowrie, in Bangalore, because apparently, she's been on camera a few times now, and apparently everybody loves Gowrie. So I would want to invite her on screen again to join me for this session. So Gowrie, come on up whenever. Here you are.
Hi, Artie. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
Oh, we're both wearing blue.
We're both wearing blue.
We're both wearing blue. Yay.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. And so, so we just want to kick the ball around here on the artist archetype, and then just kind of see what we come up with. And so to start, Gowrie, one of the many reasons I wanted you to join me for this discussion was that when you were talking about the example of manifestation from your own life and in your own arc last week, which was so beautiful, you mentioned the artist archetype as an archetype that you had recovered in your own kind of realm, and I think that was the thing that sparked all of these emails in to say, oh, that's so interesting. And, there was a lot of interest around it. So we're like, okay, let's talk about the artist archetype. And the starting point is I would love to start with a question to you of, this artist archetype you described last week, you kind of touched on it. And from your own life experience. And so to kick off this discussion, I would love to ask you, then how do you experience the artist archetype? What does this archetype even feel like to you? What does she want? How does she act upon you? What is the quality of the, interaction with her?
Thanks, Artie. That's quite an intense question.
And can you sort of like, what is the meaning of life and the true nature of reality? Just by the way, while you're at it, since it's
that's like a whole other thing. Crammed in and
okay, I'm gonna get off camera now and like go have a cup of coffee. I'll see y'all later.
So it's kind of, just talking about what I feel, how I feel the artist archetype in me is like, it's just so intense because having kind of reconciled with her and having recovered her, or however we want to say that, it's like I can't turn it off, right? I can't really have a moment where I'm not aware of her presence. So the way I look at things, the things that give me joy, the things that interest me, the things I notice, when I notice something for its color and texture, when I notice something for for its tone and for its sound, anything that comes to my attention, and I'm kind of tasting the quality of that observation that I make. To me, I instantly realize that's the artist archetype kind of channeling it to me and saying, look, this is where your attention is going, and that it's going because I'm directing that attention for you. So it's kind of all pervasive. It's everywhere, in everything. And I notice it everywhere. And I'm aware that I'm noticing it now. Right. So earlier, even though I would notice things, but I would kind of stuff it down and not be aware of what I'm doing. Or in a funny way, be aware, but deliberately try to ignore. That I'm noticing all of these, colors, textures, signs and symbols, messages of what these signs and symbols say to me. How do these colors talk to me? What do these experiences say to me? All these kinds of things. I would kind of deliberately close myself, but now that I don't, it's like everything that comes to my attention is something that the artist archetype is bringing to me. And that is because of the conversations that she wants to have with me. And then I realize it's not, this is sacred space. The archetype wanting to have a conversation with you. And that conversation itself is sacred space. It does not have an end goal, so to speak. Something may come out of it, but it's not like we're doing this because we want to achieve this by the end of the session, right? It's not with that intention. The conversation itself is the end goal, right? And having that conversation and, the archetype telling me to kind of focus my attention on something, and me appreciating that message is to be in that moment and just hold space for that message and to hold space for myself. It's just the way it is done. The flavor is that of art, because it focuses on beauty, it focuses on story and narrative. So the entire flavor is that of art. So you call it the artist archetype, but then essentially it's the sacred. So that's how I'm looking at it.
And so how is this different from before? Because before, we've known each other a long time, right? So before you would have these glimpses, these downloads of like inspiration, and you'd be scribbling madly. And so so when you say you've more intensely recovered the artist archetype, is it in percentage of time that you spend with her? Because she's not the only archetype in you, right? You still have, you're still paying bills and, going to work and, all, cooking food, all that stuff.
Yeah, all the other archetypes that come in and play their roles as well. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so she's always been there. She's always been a little bit of a grass through the crack in the concrete, right? So when you say you've recovered her, how is it different? Is it a percentage of time spent with her? Is it the quality of the time? Is it how she interacts with the other archetypes when they want to butt in, and how that space is held? Just whatever comes to you.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's I hadn't thought of it until you asked me that. But as you say this, I realize it's more a question of awareness rather than a question of time. Because earlier she would still be there, and she would still draw my attention to things. I would still be doing things that I did, but with a whole lot of profaning from my side. Right? Like how I would profane the whole experience is by asking all of these profane questions. What is the point of all this? Why am I doing this? What do I seek to achieve from this? The achievement goals, and trying to put a quantitative result that I can measure, right, to that experience, and say, look, why do I need to spend time on this? What is the point of all this? Is it going to bring me money? Is it going to bring me prestige? And if they don't bring me either, is it worth pursuing? All these kinds of questions, trying to put a value and worth on that, on every message and every experience that I felt.
From the profane side.
From the profane side, yeah, from the profane side. So that profaning is what kind of diminished the quality of it, how I felt it. So it's a question of quality and also a question of awareness. So now that I'm aware that this is the archetype, whether I like it or don't like it, whether I allow it with whatever authority I think I have, right, or I don't allow it, it's going to be there, right? And so I just notice it now, and I engage with that experience, how I feel about it, and not impose these profane questions on it. Right? It doesn't matter whether it brings me money, prestige, whether it's a waste of time or a fruitful use of time. It doesn't matter. It's there. It's just there. This is how I experience this world. So that is essentially the difference. So I am not stressed about it. I feel a lot more relaxed.
But then, okay, so then when you do spend time in this mode, of not profaning, of sitting with the artist archetype and not profaning it, how do you then turn to the profane side? Because they must be howling. They're like, you're going to spend 2 hours with her, and again, we on this side of the parliamentary aisle, our questions remain, valid and unanswered. What is the point? What is, blah, 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 blah. And so do you just ignore them? Do you just do a royal decree fiat, like, shut up, I do what I want, and I'm going to spend my, like, what is the nature of the exchange interaction?
Okay, it's funny you asked that, because I don't think I have an ideal answer for this, and I don't think the answer is something that will be like a helpful tip, because I don't think it is. And
well, we're in sacred space, so there's
we're in sacred space. So I'm going to say what I do.
You say whatever you say.
If I do feel like answering that question to the profane, side of the administration, is I'll be like, so the alternative that you tried, which is to kind of ignore the artist archetype and try to fill that time with more useful, productive stuff. Tell me, how did that go? It was exactly perfect disaster. Like, you cannot provide a better example of how disasters turn out, right? You can't ignore and push down an archetype. There is, at least this is true for me. I don't know how it is for other people. I have kind of observed in people where they successfully kind of stuff down parts of them and function on overdrive in other areas of their life. I mean, there are consequences that come out of pushing down, suppressing parts of you, which, they deal with, but also they're able to be functional in areas where they choose to, right?
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
I stuff down a part of me, I become dysfunctional. So
right.
It's really hard.
You thought it was a curse, but
yeah, I mean, I thought I was cursed, but then I realized, you know what? The only way to be functional, if I want to be functional, is to just go with whatever this part of me that is being exiled, that is being pushed down, and saying to me. Because if she is not heard, she's not going to let anyone else be heard.
Right. Now that's royalty.
Yeah. I realized it the hard way. So for me, it's kind of like when these profane questions come up, it's only that I didn't know how to answer those questions before. Now I do. Now it's like, tell me how you're going to work without this. And then, I'll listen to you. And I know the answer is, we can't really function. So we might as well do whatever you're doing. Because at least I am being, I would say, productive. And you have, used the term generative so many times now. And I've learned to appreciate that term, right? Generative instead of productive. And I'm at least generative now. I create something, I create content, I create art, and whatever it is that the Muse tells me, I'm able to do that and at least have something to show for the time I've spent doing it. And if I don't choose to do that, I simply cannot function. I will have nothing to show for that time. So there really is no argument with the profane on this. The profane knows, well, if the message comes in, it needs to be done. There's no questioning it. So, I mean, I understand that's very hard to kind of practice for many people, including me. And you still have to work and you have bills to pay, and sometimes you're stuck in a path that seems like you can't navigate out of in the moment. All of those challenges come in, and it's not something I would just say, ignore everything and just listen to whatever is the message in this moment. And maybe I would, but I also want to acknowledge that it is hard. But for me, at least, I've not found any other way.
And so when you sit with artist archetype for a while, what happens? Like, what do you notice happens differently in your life, if anything?
Like I said, I think the term, and you will confirm this, Artie, you've seen the gradual change in me, right? And you have experienced this as well, in the sense of how insights and ideas come through. Ideas for new projects, or ideas while working on a project, insights that we can work on. And the way things have been flowing for me, now that I've kind of acknowledged this and I work with the archetype, is so different in terms of quality as well as in terms of the flow. Because I would really have to kind of struggle before to get good ideas and workable ideas. And try to, it was literally a struggle, right? I had to push the ideas out of me, and sometimes had to beg my muse to help me with something. It was like every time it was pleading and begging, like, help me out, please, I need this. And now it's like, even when I'm working, and a couple of days ago I said this to you, that even as I was working on something, I had ideas kind of flowing for something else. And I would just take breaks to write down a couple of sentences and then come back and sit and do this work again.
Yeah, it's a mess. It sprays all over in all directions.
Praise like that. It's just
Yeah.
sporadic and comes in bursts, but comes without coaxing and without
Right.
pleading, right?
Mm.
Because I think essentially the change, the difference has been that in the artist archetype, knowing that when she has something to say, it won't be dismissed.
Right.
So when that understanding has come in, she's like, okay, here's a thought. And then I go and kind of note it down.
So here's a question. We talked a lot about the Muse in the past sessions. Even in the series, we talked a lot about the Muse. How do you think about the distinction between the Muse and the artist archetype?
Whew. It is. Honestly, and this is the amazing thing. I have no idea how I know the answer right now, because until now I hadn't thought about it. Frankly, it doesn't matter. Like whoever speaks to me, I just listen and take notes. But what's coming to me now at this moment is that I feel like the Muse is someone of authority, and someone who, like a leader, or like how you say the CEO, sort of holds the vision, and she kind of directs and regulates and moderates what goes on in the inner world, so that she can then channel her vision through the whole pantheon of forces that exist within us. And the artist archetype is someone who channels that vision in a very specific style. Her language of expression is art. Takes that vision and then she channels it into art, and that is how she kind of sends through the vision to manifest it in outer life. So she has a very specific kind of function and role, and she does it in the kind of like a conduit or a conductor of the Muse's vision, right? So that's how I see it. And the Muse is, I don't know if I'm kind of visualizing it as I'm saying this. So for me, the Muse is up there. Like she is the be all and end all of everything. So she's kind of supervising, leading, guiding, and putting down the vision for everyone within you. And then each archetype kind of takes it, fashions it in their own way, in their own style, in the way they function, and then channels it out into the outer world. So art is just one of the ways the vision manifests. And there could be other ways, depending on what archetype sort of takes on a dominant role or an prominent role at that moment.
I love that. Thank you.
So, I mean, I have no idea. I just said this the way it came to me and not thought of this.
No, I totally agree with it. I mean, the image that comes to me hearing you talk is actually, I think of the Odyssey, and I think of the interplay between Athena and Odysseus. And the way it's coming to me is that Athena is obviously the Muse, and Odysseus is is here the artist, right? Yeah. The artist. And the idea here is that, and so I want to give you this, everyone, this as an example. So what I'm doing here is, Gowrie is describing something. I'm matching it to an archetype in my mind. of Athena and Odysseus.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm doing here in real time, I haven't prepared this, this just came to me, is that now this image of Athena and Odysseus from human collective experience, it's from the Greek tradition, right? But it could be from Hindu, anything that pops into your mind. This is why having a mythopoetic library in your head and just reading a lot is helpful, right? So I'm pulling this Athena Odysseus thing. And then the next step, because when we talked about manifestation, we talked about this, you find the pattern and then you mine the pattern itself. And like the elephant trunk and the foot and everything. So the thing you're saying is Muse and artist are separate. Muse gives it to the artist, and artist then makes it, first of all, has to accept it and not, screw it up, right? And then the artist then artifices, crafts, articulates, right? That sort of spirit stuff into physical manifestation.
Yeah.
Right, in the form of sculpture, building, song, inspiration, what have you.
Yeah.
And so then the next step is, which I'm about to do. I'm just like, I wanted to pause to sort of comment on just what's happening even now, to get more clues as to the dynamics and flavor and physics of that muse artist relationship. We've been given Athena Odysseus. So we go into the details of Athena and Odysseus and look for additional aspects of the pattern that we didn't know before. And so for me, as we sit here, when I think of Athena and Odysseus, one of the things that comes to mind is that when Odysseus actively prays to Athena, right? And he's the trickster. He is the trickster figure. So it's almost like Muse and then artist / trickster. They are distinct archetypes, but they're very closely joined. There's actually a story I was thinking of telling from the Norse tradition. I was mentioning this to you, that kind of combines artist and trickster. And maybe we'll get to that today. But basically, the artist, so Odysseus prays to Athena for help. And she comes to him, she gives him advice, he listens and continues to say, yes, yes, say more, to the point where even during the Trojan War, right, in the Odyssey, Nestor tells Telemachus, Odysseus' son, something like, we've read this in the past, right, in these sessions, never have I seen a man so blatantly, shamelessly favored by the gods. We would be on the plain of Troy, planning our next move, and you could literally see Odysseus off in the corner, right, literally talking to thin air, and you knew Athena was on the field of battle, standing next to him, their heads bowed together, going, working it out. And Nestor was practically brought to tears, telling his son, telling Telemachus, Odysseus' son, about his father. He's like, I have never seen that in my life. And, you as a son, you deserve to know. And, if only you could be so lucky as well, all of this would be solved in a moment. And then Mentor, the guy standing next to Telemachus, says all this stuff. He's actually Athena in disguise.
So
Nestor is waxing poetic. Meanwhile, Telemachus has Athena by his side, and neither of them actually knows it. I mean, Telemachus doesn't know it. And then Mentor says, yeah. Well, all right. Anyway, you got to do this. You got to do this. Everyone got it? Okay. All right. We'll see you after the game. And she turns into a hawk and flies away. And they're like, oh. Yeah. That was her I was talking about. So this feeling of this tight communion and bond, right? Another aspect of the relationship comes when, countless times when mentor / Athena tells Telemachus to do something. He whines. He's like, oh, nothing ever works out for me. Life sucks. I don't know why I'm so cursed. And Athena, like, like in many ways, the first of the gods, right? The sort of Zeus's firstborn in many ways, like looks at him and is just like, dude, you have no idea how lucky you are. I am here. And he's still whining, right? And Odysseus at countless points, Athena comes down, lays it out. Here's how you get home. Number 1, number 2, A, B, C, da 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 da, and you will get home where others have like drowned and never made it home and like gnashed their teeth and gone down to the underworld. Even Achilles, even Agamemnon went down to the underworld, and you will have your shot at getting home. But you need to do these like 4 things. And Odysseus starts crying. He's like, I can't believe I have to do this. This is like, because he has to go to the underworld. He has to do all these like basically impossible tasks. So another thing that comes up here, I guess, is part of this call and response, right, of Muse and artist within you is Muse says, here's what you're going to do. And the artist says, oh, crap, you have got to be kidding me. It's such familiarity that you're not even like, because you can only be reverent and subservient, and filial to the god for so long. Right? You can't do that 24/7. Right. So in a way, being extra reverent is a way of holding the god at arm's length. Right. And when you allow her even closer, she'll say, no, turn left, not right. And it's like, really? I'm driving. You're telling me how to drive? What the hell? And she's like, stop eating French fries while you're at it. I'm like, oh my God. Right. You're like, and this is like intimacy with the divine in a way. And so I think the artist archetype is the avatar of that. Where the artist says to all the other mortals, okay, I got the download. To conquer Troy, we need to build a big wooden horse. And he's not the king of the Achaeans. Right? Odysseus is one. Agamemnon is the one leading it, and everyone starts laughing, and it's like, are you kidding? We're going to build up, a horse, and then we're going to sail away, right? And the artist is always fighting this like uphill battle. Forget about the outer world, with your own inner self.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Writers are like, the artist tells you what to write. Go back and cut out 20% of the first half of your novel, even though the second half is like not even written yet. Right. And the rest of the artist, the other archetypes around the artist are like, are you kidding? Right. How is that going to win us the Nobel Prize in literature? Right. And it's like, excuse me, what? We're not here for your little prize, right? We're here to sort of bring this into the world. And we've chosen you. So, let's get on with it. So it is this like deep feeling of intimacy. And then the last thing I want to bring up here that's coming is that in the Odyssey, Athena is not Zeus. The Muse is not Zeus. So you say this like be all end all, the Muse, in my experience and looking at the archetype of Athena, is not omnipotent. Right? To even go down and like rescue Odysseus from Calypso's island, she needs to put in a request to Zeus. And she's like his favorite daughter, his like first daughter. So she knows how to like push his buttons, but she still has to do it. Right? And say, well, how can you forget like Odysseus? Haven't you enjoyed all of the sacrifices he's given you? And he's like, dear child, what are you talking about? Come on. Of course I support him. If you think it's time now, I give you full permission to like go. And she's like, thank you, Daddy. And she goes. She like plays him like a Stradivarius, right?
I don't know, like, what the hell?
But she has to do that. And then during the whole Odyssey, she's butting heads through proxy with Poseidon, right, who has it in for Odysseus. He's like, I know you're fated to get back, and I can't completely kill you, but man, I'm going to make you pay for it. I'm just going to make you pay for it. Right? And the final sacrifice of the Odyssey is to Poseidon. Right? That final reconciliation at the end. So it's this feeling of like the muse is not, I mean, you've talked about this too, where you're coming to this point where the muse is not this mother that you just have to listen to. But she's come to you saying, look, you're an equal. We're equals.
Yeah.
And we've got to get this done, because it's not just like I'm ordering you around and you do this.
Yeah.
It's like there's a game going on. We're on a team. For now, Poseidon, other gods are on the other team. And stop worshiping me and saying, oh my gosh, I'm your whatever. Like, we got to hustle.
Mm-hmm.
We got to hustle. We're in like the third quarter already. We're in the second half of the game. We got to hustle. So that's that kind of feeling that comes. And who knows if any of this is right. But the thing is, like, the way my mind works in terms of archetypal manifestation as an example, and then with archetype is you're sitting in reflection on this. And you're thinking about artist archetype. Another question comes up of like, what's the relationship of artist and muse? You asked your nerdy friend in Bangalore what she thinks. She tells you, right? And then you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds like Athena and Odysseus. And then you go into Athena and Odysseus, you like check the notes, and all these other aspects of the muse artist relationship get lit up and revealed. And then you have that. And then that's what you install in a way. And then that accelerates the manifestation, because the next time I talk to my muse, I already kind of picture her as Athena. And, I'll ask her, it's like, so is it okay that, I mean, actually, she's already been doing all this, right?
Yeah.
When she says, eat fewer French fries, I'm like, I don't question whether it's her. It's like, no, the muse gives her 2 cents and opines on these little things too. And that's okay. It's a form of, intimacy. Right. Like, it's almost like, don't insult her by saying these smaller topics are not worthy of her. She will decide. She chooses. First of all, the fact that she's even talking to you is extraordinary. But she chooses to talk to you about French fries, or like, what you're going to do about this like petty work thing. She chose to interact at that level with you. Right. And you dishonor her when you say, no, we don't talk. We only talk about big things. And you hold her at arm's length because you fear her. Because you fear her. Do you have any?
Evaluation of what is big and what is small, and what's important, what's not important. That's the profane pushing through, right?
Right.
Let's put this price tag on everything, and not really hold space for things the way they are, and and decide what they should be, right? So it's interesting. The question that I had in my mind when you were talking about Athena and the whole pantheon of gods is, would you say that the muse is the muse and her vision is the one that binds all the archetypes together within you? Is that a thing that she does?
I think, I think yes. But when she and the artist, let's say, are being pushed down, she is the, orchestrator and coordinator of the guerrilla freedom fighter forces, Rebel Alliance in Star Wars terms, right? And when you find yourself in that state, we call that you're in the part of the cycle we call healing. Right? And the crux of healing, it's like rescripting and talking about wounds. We don't do therapy. We don't talk about like family of origin or even inner child, because it's like you don't know it's a child, right? Is to find whatever has been exiled and consider how we would even recover it. right? And the Muse is the one banging, a brick on a pipe underneath all the rubble, right? Going like, here we are, we're down here, come get us.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward when you've done all this healing and the Muse is back and you're talking to her and the artist is starting to spring forth without everyone dogpiling on him at every turn, you start to ask questions that we call, bliss-related questions. Like, so what am I here to do? What is my meaning and purpose in life? Even net of prestige and what other people want and think of me. Like, what do I want to do? And all the bliss questions, right? Desire questions, not just need and want. And then you get into like a bliss cycle, and then you get pitched back into healing because you'll go up until you hit another wall, which is an even deeper wound, right? The further up the tree grows, the further down the roots need to go. And when you hit a big boulder here, upward growth stops too, and all this stuff needs to focus on getting around the boulder, and that's okay. So you go back and forth from bliss to healing and back again all your life.
Right.
The world is a bellows, right? It's like a pumping lung. Ideally it never stops, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're in a bliss cycle, the rebels have won, and she's the queen. And things really accelerate because you're not just fighting for control of kingdom. You control the kingdom now, right? I am, I'm not a tech guy anymore. I'm a healer. And the more I commit to that and hang a shingle up and introduce myself at cocktail parties as I guess a healer, right? The more she's the queen, she doesn't have to fight for sitting on her throne. And from her throne, she can start building highways, infrastructure, making things more efficient, prosperous. The crops, flourish and get delivered to the right parts of you for nourishment. All of that happens. So the Muse can be, but there are different phases and cycles to that. That's my feeling. Of that. Yeah.
It's interesting you brought this thing about just the recognition of her being who she is, and also admitting it to yourself changes the entire kind of dynamics, and you give more space for her to do what she wants to do, rather than just fight for her position and recognition and validation all the time. So I can so totally relate to that. Through all the things that I said last week, the shift in energy that I feel from the moment I said, okay, the artist archetype, I have it in me very strong, and I have to acknowledge that. The moment I said that to myself, the enormous shift in energy,
right,
and that flow happened, because then she didn't have to just keep knocking on the door and banging on the door to be let in. She was in, so she could just do what she came for. So I can totally relate to that. That's just so powerful.
Yeah, it's like waiting for 3 hours to get into a restaurant. You're like bribing the maitre d'. You're like trying to throw your weight around, and then finally you're sitting down, and you have the menu, and it's a completely different phase of the operation. Where it's like, okay, we're seated, everything's good. We were already thinking about this menu, and now we can start, implementing and making our selections. It's a feeling of relief, but also like, all right, now we really got to get to work, in a good way.
Yeah, and to think that is the phase where there's so much resistance, and that it takes so long to kind of cross that threshold, right, where you're not resisting anymore and you're just accepting. And I don't believe that mine's like an isolated case or unique. I think it happens to everyone in very different ways at different times in their life, and just finally accepting that, I have this archetype and I need to kind of acknowledge that. It's funny how much of that resistance happens, and it's so common. And so that's what came to me from last week's session after I had done talking, is that, and we can get that testified, but by all the kind of comments and responses we've got for this, is that everyone feels like, yeah, I have the artist archetype. Yeah, I do see that now. And when you hear that, what came to me was, yeah, but isn't that how it is? Doesn't everyone have the artist archetype? It's not a special state of existence where, I'm blessed, I have the artist archetype in me. It's not something everyone has, but yeah, I have it. It's not really that way, but everybody has it. And the levels of resistance that we feel and the different artistic ways that we find to push it down might be kind of different and unique to each individual, but we all have it. So
Right.
that kind of made me think that, the artist archetype is not limited or restricted to art. I mean, I think the misconception largely, at least for me, was that when you say the artist archetype, I would think of it as the arts. And the artist, the painter, the musician, the actor, the singer, the poet. And, these are forms of arts. I mean, they carry very profound meaning and sense. But the artist archetype's function is not restricted only to these arts, right? I mean, there are other ways of expressing the inner experience and the message they want to express, or bliss in ways that an artist archetype fashions, but it doesn't necessarily have to qualify as art in the outer world. So to me, that sense that came strongly because, as an artist, what do? You find patterns in things. You notice patterns where, other people probably don't notice it. And then you make sense of those patterns. And then you put forth those patterns for others to see and receive a message out of it. And you could do that with numbers. You could do that with, with data, with software, with coding. I mean, I know there's like numerous ways of doing it, right?
In tech, we often say, the best developers, the software engineers, are painters. The rhythms of their work, the way they think, the way they talk to each other, they're just like painters. And, as CEO who used to hire and, sort of run teams of these, mostly guys, but, men and women, that archetype or motif was tremendously helpful for me in figuring out how to keep them happy and motivate them and make them productive for my profane ends of being a software CEO, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. I wasn't aware of that, but I always wondered how so many mathematicians are musicians.
Oh,
Somehow
absolutely.
kind of go with that, right? Because music is mathematics in some form.
Someone said, I forgot who this was, but there's a visible world and an invisible world. Okay. And you could say the visible is more profane, the invisible is more sacred. And there are 4 great bridges between the worlds: music, math, myth, and mysticism. 4 great bridges across the world, across those 2 realms, across the veil between the worlds of the visible and the invisible. And the thing that all 4 of those have in common, math, music, myth, and mysticism, is that heavy reliance and congress in the language of archetype. Right? I mean, these are basically 4 dialects of archetype. And so, so that thank you for that. Should we talk about that story we were going to do? What else do you want to say?
Because I think it's very intriguing for me, because I always thought of Trickster as as its own archetype, like you said, but also when you said, Trickster as an artist, and I'm like, of
Mm.
course he's an artist, because the Trickster, is an actor. And he, and in acting, when you do like quick change in costume on stage, off stage, and you just come out as a totally different character, that's a Trickster coming into play. But you have to be an excellent artist to be able to pull that off. So
I mean, our greatest, what we traditionally think of as artists, are huge. I mean, Picasso was a huge trickster.
yeah.
And yet he completely submitted to his muse. Right?
Yeah.
He would always say, "I do not seek, I find."
Yeah.
In other words, to seek is profane. I have a goal that I have decided on, and I'm going to go find this.
Yeah.
And like win the Nobel Prize and do all this stuff. And the sacred is to find, where you sit there in a receptive mode with no agenda.
Yeah.
And then the things that fall in front of you, you accept. Right? You surrender to, you accept without, pissing on it or saying, how is this going to make money? How is this going to win me prestige? You simply accept.
Yeah.
And I mean, the first time I heard that, when that quote of his, that I do not seek, I find, it hit me at a visceral level of how true it was, but I couldn't articulate why it was true. And it's taken me years to really come to more clarity on that, that one aspect of it. So yeah, Picasso is a tremendous trickster. And in the profane, the trickster is shamed, because it's like, he has all these mistresses, and he's like, I think questionable how like nurturing a dad he necessarily was. Because everything was consumed by this.
Yeah.
Sort of, because to sit there doing nothing, completely in surrender to accept whatever you find, right? That requires a lot of space.
Yes.
That pushes out a lot of aspects of the profane. Right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so trickster. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm waiting for the story. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay. So so the idea here is that I just want to tell us a story about sort of connecting the artist and trickster. And I want to be very careful here, because the artist archetype and the trickster archetype are completely different and distinct. I don't think we could ever even do a session like this on the trickster. It would take like 10 sessions. There's just too much to talk about. And even after 10 sessions, he or she would slip away, right? Because that's the nature of the trickster archetype. But for sure, when we're not talking about trickster, we're talking about artist. Trickster like pops his head up. So now I'm going to talk about both. The word for so the root of the word art is the word for joint, like joint. An artisan is a joiner, right? And so the artisan is a joiner, is a maker of things, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact that the work of art is in the joint is exactly what binds it with the trickster archetype. Because the trickster works in the joints. The trickster works in the joints. Hermes, for instance, who is the trickster god, right? So Athena can be like Muse, but sort of god of war and wisdom and counsel, right? Aphrodite is the goddess of love. Ares is the god of war. Hermes is the god of, rogues, robbers, thieves, con men, merchants, travelers, the god of exchange, and the god of trickery, right? So the trickster archetype is personified in Hermes. And one of the epithets for Hermes is he is the god of the hinge, the joint, right? So a door swings on a hinge, and the trick of the hinge is that, I mean, there's a number of different things, right? it makes the door swing out, but it also can swing in unexpectedly and hit you in the face. A squeaky hinge will give you away. A quiet hinge will allow you to be stealthy. And it's in the hinge that, when you're trying to sort of open a door that's jammed, right, and you can't pick the lock, right, the alternative is to basically take it off its hinges and the whole door comes falling down.
Yeah.
But nobody ever thinks of that because you ignore the hinge. The hinge is invisible. You take it for granted. And so, and some of these ideas I'm going to share. If you're interested, there's a scholar by the name of Lewis Hyde, Hyde. He's written 2 incredible books. I think one is called Trickster Makes This World. And then the second book of his is called The Gift, which if you're an artist, you probably have already read. So this is Lewis Hyde. And if you're interested in these ideas of artist and trickster together, Lewis Hyde is like, I think he's in his probably 80s now. Just fantastic thinker on these topics. So there's a story that's told by Lewis Hyde, I think in one of his books. And I just want to give the thumbnail of that here because it really touches the jugular of this joining between the artist and the trickster archetype. Okay. An artist is an artisan, a craftsperson that works in the joint, in the area where worlds join. Because it's in the joint that there's flexibility and looseness and capability for change. Right? The wooden face of the door is static. It will never change. Right? The only way a door is dynamic is from the hinge. It's the joint that makes the edifice dynamic.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want anything to be dynamic, it comes in the art in the joint, right? So art, the root of the word art is the word for joint, and this R word, art, comes up in a lot of different places. So when you are speaking, you say he's very articulate, right? It means I hit the joints clearly, right? I hit the joints of each consonant very clearly. I don't like just talk and I hear the consonants, right? I'm very articulate and I make each point clearly. I pause, I make room for the silences. I break things into pieces for clarity and for trickery, right? A con man is like very articulate as well. But articulate also means jointed, right? An articulated skeleton is a skeleton with joints in the bio classroom, right? The articles in language, right, are the joints of language. The ands, the buts, the ors, and so what a trickster does is an artisan of the joint. And what happens is the trickster makes sure the joint is loose and lubricated so that things can swing. Fear clenches. Fear clenches. Those of you who do meditation with me, I'm always doing this in meditation, right? And I'm like, when you meditate, you're doing this. It's not nothing. It's this, right? And this strong muscles, this and this, allow you to play the violin, play the piano, right? Gesture, because you need the full range of motion. You need your joints. So there's a story from the Norse tradition. So Loki, Odin, and in the Norse pantheon, there's a god called Balder, right? Balder, Baldr. And Balder is like the sun god, this Apollo, golden child sun god. Perfect, he is the sun that rises. I mean, in Norse, in the northern hemisphere, the sun will rise until like the solstice, and then it will basically go back down. There will be this turning point. Okay, there will be this turning point where the sun turns back, where Balder basically dies and goes back down. Okay. And in the story, Balder is like, you know, he's the golden child. Everybody loves Balder. And he wakes up one morning and he tells his mother, Frigg, that he's been having these bad dreams, and you know, in these dreams he's going to die. Well, if the son dies, it's all over. So this is a disaster. Everyone's really worried about this. So Frigg goes around, is very concerned about this. And Frigg is like the Hera, right? The sort of wife of Odin, the sort of queen, mother goddess of the pantheon. So she has authority. She goes around to, and the text says, to everything in heaven and earth, and extracts an oath from them to not hurt Balder. So she extracts this oath from all the trees, the rocks, the birds, the clouds, everything. Extracts an oath from them to not hurt Balder. So now he's invulnerable. He's invincible. Okay? And you know, because it's Norse, because it's like Vikings, now they know Baldur's invulnerable. One of their drinking parties is they stand Baldur up, and he's like, okay, this is like a, you know, American college fraternity here. They stand Baldur up, and they just throw stuff at him. They throw knives, they throw swords, everything bounces off him, and they're like, ah ha ha, and they're like drinking their mead and everything. So this is one of the games. Now, in the midst of all this, Loki, who is the trickster god of the Norse pantheon, the Hermes, he doesn't like this. You know, he doesn't like this. The sun, everything is like frozen stiff, just the way you like it. And now you have decreed that nothing will change. Nothing will change. I just want everything to be the same, and I want nothing to change. And the hinge is frozen. You want to protect the brain. You want nothing entering the brain. So there's the blood-brain barrier becomes calcified, and no blood can get into the brain. Right? So the brain is successfully protecting itself, but the whole body is going to die. You can't have, you know, Balder just invulnerable, and you know, there's no room for life at that point. So Loki doesn't like this. And so he disguises himself as an old woman and talks to Frigg and gets her to reveal to him that, you know, well, you know, I didn't, you know, I extracted an oath from everything in heaven and earth, but except the mistletoe. Except the mistletoe. The mistletoe's so like small and innocent and harmless, you know, like, you know, who would she hurt anyway? So I didn't bother like going to her. And then, of course, Loki knows this now. So he goes up to the top of the trees, because mistletoe grows, a tree grows like this. And at the very top of the evergreen tree, or actually oak trees, mistletoe will grow as this like parasitic growth. And that's the sign, the symbol. Because mistletoe, because Frigg extracted an oath from everything in heaven and earth. Mistletoe is right at the joint between heaven and earth.
Right.
And she missed it, and that's where Loki goes. So he takes the mistletoe, goes down, throws it at Balder, and kills him. Like he makes a dart of mistletoe or something, like takes him out at the knees, at the joints, right? And then Balder dies, the sun dies. Right? Actually, in ancient Norse culture, the mistletoe was gathered, I think, at like the summer solstice, right when the sun would start going back down on its track. So all of this is connected. And it's like all the gods are really pissed. They like grab Loki, they tie him up, they like put him down in Tartarus, and not Tartarus, but like the underworld. And, you know, taking the trickster god and exiling him is what brings on Ragnarok, the apocalypse, where the entire world basically blows up and needs to be reborn. Transformation. When you stuff down the trickster, you're inviting like huge transformation, like apocalyptic transformation. So those of you who are like Marvel Universe fans, I mean, that's more the Disney-fied version, but Ragnarok, you know, comes about because after this, they stuck Loki down in the underworld, and then it became this volcano that blew everything up.
Mm.
So this whole, when you read a myth like this, the myth as a whole is an archetype.
Mm.
Right? So it can be a single Trickster Loki archetype. It can be Picasso as an artist archetype. It can be a dyad, right? A sort of Athena and Odysseus archetype.
Mm.
But then all of the Odyssey is a full archetype of its own.
Yeah.
Right? A myth is basically a collection of archetypes, and you hit the play button and see what happens.
Yeah.
So the action of trying to protect Balder, the action of extracting an oath and then missing something at the joint, and then the trickster coming in at the joint to basically destroy everything. But it's the destruction that allows the renewal, and life can continue to flow again. And so that, for me, this joint of the mistletoe. So mistletoe is at the joint, but also it grows at the top of trees and is still green all through winter. So even though the oak tree is like dead in winter, there is still this sort of spirit of the oak, which is the mistletoe, that stays green, ongoing life even through winter and death. Right? This joint. So mistletoe in this tradition is like a very powerful symbol. And so this idea, this feeling of ongoing life even through death is the realm of Loki and artist and the trickster. Right? Because even Ragnarok itself is like utter apocalypse of everything. But after Ragnarok, there is another universe that's created. And it's because the mistletoe survives even through the winter. Right? So it's the job of the trickster to keep things moving, even though everyone's grabbing the radiator going, I'm not going, I'm terrified, and then flush them through, and then they come out the other end. And then they do it again, I'm not going, and then flush them through again. Like Kali is this figure as well.
Right.
So to me, every artist is a joint worker, is a trickster, because they are able to get into places where no one else can get. In our example, even the healing arts that we practice, right? Everything I do at Preside with regard to healing is all in the joint, right? I mean, I have disclaimers all over the site. Nothing I do is medical. It's not a substitute for medical therapy at all. If you ever have any doubts, don't force yourself. Go check with your therapist or whatever, or check with your priest, your pastor. And if anyone says, don't do my stuff, then listen to them, don't do it. Right? It's not educational, right? There's no curriculum, there's no certificate. It's just, I call it just general advising. You can call it entertainment if you want. But at the same time, thousands of people have come to me and they've said, I've done 30 years of therapy and all this other alternative stuff and ayahuasca and like Kundalini, and nothing has been better than this, right? And for that, I take no pride. I make no claims. Because we can't. We can't, because it's of the nature, what we do, of magic. It's completely unpredictable.
Yeah. Because
we are working in the joint at the articulation point, right? Between like medical, educational, and then, where most of you found me is on Facebook, right? I post right up there next to like fake news and cat videos. Right. So it's right in the joint, right? That trickster action of like showing up in this random place at 3 a.m, and then you come in, and next thing you know, you're like, 6 months later, you've quit your job and you're following your bliss, and it's working, right? So this joint is where the artist practices her artistry and trickery. I'll give you another example. I've done a bunch of work at like very prestigious, you'd recognize the name, medical centers all over Northern California. Some of them children's hospitals. And when I mention this, I don't mention this anymore because it's just not something I really want too much more of. But basically, when people hear I work with medical centers, I was like, oh, you work with the patients and the kids and the families. I'm like, no, absolutely not. Right? That's way too heavy. Right? You would need like 10 years of clinical studies before I would even like approach an actual patient with any kind of meditation practice in a house of scientific curing, right? As opposed to healing, scientific curing. So to offer the word like meditation to any patient under the medical center imprimatur, I would never do that, right? And that's appropriate. Under the heavy burden of all of this prestige, a medical center is not really the place where you're going to innovate. It's the place where you must deliver perfection, right? You must deliver perfection, and that's okay. So then where I work in the medical center, and I never intended this. I have friends at like Stanford, Harvard, who just like pulled me in. And often I'll do it pro bono. I'll just do it as a favor for a friend of a friend. So where I work and have worked is with the staff, with the physicians, with the charge nurses, or senior execs at the C level, where they are the workhorses. They are the joints of the medical center, where they are supposed to provide perfection, but nobody gives a shit about their wellness because they are the workhorses. There have been articles about the suicide rate at Harvard Medical and other places, right? Not just Harvard. And the attitude is, well, just deal with it. You're the physician, just deal with it. We're all backstage. Smoke what you need to smoke and get back out there and continue scoring goals and delivering perfection. And they are, for the past 10 years, they've been cracking under the stress. And through the cracks is where I'm most comfortable, right? Through the keyhole, the hinge, the joint. Where the physician core cracks is where Balder, right, starts to crack. And so when I go in, I'm sitting down with physicians and I'm saying, yeah, this is not medical. This is not. And they're like, yeah, we know. We've heard of you. Kind of give us what you got. Here's your laminated note, like disclaiming everything. That's fine. And so we help them with stress, and they don't need double-blind studies. They're happy to not they're just happy to not burn out for another month and continue working, right? And then, of course, after we help them, they often end up passing that healing on to the patients in subtle ways, not even like through a recommendation, but just their bedside manner is completely different, right? And so for me, it's a funny kind of thing. This kind of medical center work, I never went looking for it because and it's not scalable, right? All my work is online. I like the scalable stuff. But I got pulled into it. It was kind of like a Muse thing to pull me into it. And that's okay, right? That's okay. And the last thing I'll say is that another way to think about the archetype of artist and healer, trickster and joints is one pattern I've seen is that time itself is jointed. So for instance, the seasons, the holidays, holy days are the joints of time, but also the phases of life, right? So we talk about the phases of life, boy/girl, woman/man, queen/king, crone/sage, right? These phases of life. In between each phase is a joint of initiation and transformation. And going through that transformation from girl to woman is terrifying. It's terrifying, right? You start bleeding from between your legs and you have hopefully you have some cultural context and people pull you aside and celebrate you and honor you. But if nobody says anything to you, you think you're dying. You think you're bleeding to death. And so each joint is a period of transformation where often all hell breaks loose, right? Balder dies and it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about this? And these are the joints in between the chapters of the arc of our life. And it is typically at these joints that a healer like me appears, right? On the cusp of manhood, on the cusp of queenhood, cronehood. This is where the clay is still soft, or it's become soft again. And then, you're like scrolling through Facebook and you come across my ad, or a friend mentions me, or and then you come in, and I give a lot of different masks for you to wear. I'm just here for meditation. I just have a little stress relief, or I'm not here for healing. I'm just here to look for my bliss. I need a little career help. It's like, all right, we'll start there. And then everyone ends up in healing anyhow. Or they start moving toward it. They're terrified. They leave for 2 years and then they come back after. And that's all right. We're just, running an air traffic control. That's why the online part is so powerful. And so this is kind of this joint of the healing art. So when I say, just a week ago, when I was like, I guess I'm sort of an artist too, and you totally like nailed me on that. You were like, we're definitely doing this talk now, if even you are saying that, right? So I am an artist, right? I am an artist of healing, and I am a joint worker of healing, and it's the reflection that you set me on that I just shared with everyone. I'm the healer archetype, I'm the trickster archetype, king archetype, but I'm also the artist archetype, very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you brought that up. I wanted to say, when you were talking about your work with the medical center, and also how you position your healing and how you work through that, one of the realizations I had after last week's talk is how the artist archetype is also a healer. And the very expression of art is a work of healing. And it addressed a huge profane question for me that's been kind of haunting me for years. Is like, what is the purpose of even creating a work of art or indulging in art? What's the point? It usually comes from, I have nothing original to say, or whatever I have to say has been said a million times in the last, how many of a millennia that we've been living here. Everyone has said it. All the great artists, all the not so great artists, however you want to look at them, all the obscure and the famous, everyone has said it. So what is it that I'm going to say that's going to make any difference? Or why should I even say it? And here's the thing, that when you talked about how everyone goes through life through these transformations, these joints where things don't make sense or are terrifying in the moment to go through, and hopefully someone gives them the context and gives them a perspective of what is happening with them and what they're going through. And that is art as well. That's the function of art as well. So all of the songs and folk tales and movies, cinema, and music, and everything that we do, the mythopoetic sort of expressions, poetry, everything that we do is to convey our inner experiences to our community and whoever needs it, whoever is receiving it. And the artist, by sharing the inner experience, kind of the inner experience becomes more clear and more intense during the process of creating that art. And the receiver who listens to that or who views that work of art, even the recipient starts to kind of make sense of their own inner life experience. And the work of art facilitates this process in both the creator as well as the receiver. And that's the whole function, the transformation, to facilitate transformation and to facilitate healing. So the artist, just by creating art, is already a healer.
Right.
They're healing themselves, but they're also healing others. I mean, they probably are not aware of it. They don't know it at the moment, but that's the dynamic that happens. So to me, I became kind of aware of that, and it answered that question as to why even do this? What is the point? Even though you're repeating the same old message over and over, but that's what is needed for humanity to continue its whole cycle of living experiences, right? For humanity to live out its myth over and over. I mean, every single day someone is born and someone dies. How many times are we going to do this, right? How many times are we going to be born? How many times are we going to die?
Right.
And live through this life over and over.
Yeah.
That is how many times we are going to sing the same love songs, and we're going to paint the same flower, and we repeat the same message over and over.
Yeah.
And when I got that perspective, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not going to ask dumb questions anymore. You know, when the muse says do something, it just do it.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I remember when we had this conversation last week, and it really just brought home that classical idea of, life itself is a celebration, right? I mean, it's not the point of life. It's like it's not that the point of life is celebration. It's like life is the celebration.
Yeah.
It's everything exploding and saying hooray. In other words, it's sort of like, when you say, why do we have to sing a million different love songs? Why do we have to keep painting the same flower a million different times? There's this idea of this stamping image of there's an archetype, right? And the opposite, the counterpart of archetype, the word archetype, is ectype. So archetype is like the stamp, and ectype is the thing that's stamped. So if I have a stamp that has like a star on it, right? This is the stamp. And when I stamp it, there's a star ink on a paper. So this is the archetype, and that's the ectype.
Yeah, the impression of the archetype. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the artist archetype, and then Picasso would be one of its ectypes.
Right.
Okay. And so it is this stamping action that is the million flowers being painted, right? And the million humans being born, and the million love songs being sung. And the question of like, well, why would you keep stamping it? And it's the same question of like, when there's a couple, it's like asking the question of, why do we have to keep like making love like every day? Why do we've already done it. So we've done it. It's done. Why do we keep doing it? Right? We keep doing it because it's celebration. It's like, why do we keep saying, I love you? It's like, after all, it's not a knowledge transfer. I'm not informing you of something you don't already know. It's an act. It's a stamping, right?
Yeah.
And the point of the stamping is just joy, pleasure, right? It's like when you go to a wedding, right? It's not like a football game where it's like you're going to find out what happens, right? You're not going to find out if the two people getting married are going to say, I do. You already know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But the reason they actually say I do is that it's not a knowledge transfer. It is an act. It is a binding act. It is a stamping.
Yeah.
And so the other thought that came to me after our conversation last week is this idea of like, every artist is a healer, for sure. In two respects. One is like everyone who is an artist, everyone who follows their bliss, everyone who does healing is themselves a healer because they're a signpost for the world. Right? So if you see a guy like me and you're like, oh, he's following his bliss and it seems to be all working out, that's great, but that's healing for you too, because it's like, there's a voice in you that's like, oh, that's great. And we'd like to do that too. Right. And there's going to be another voice in you that says, oh, but, maybe for him, but not for me. Because I'm not as whatever, talented or whatever. But then there's going to be another voice that says, wait a minute. He's just a knucklehead like anybody else. Right. And if he could do it, why can't I do it too?
Yeah.
Right. Why can't I do it too? And that's the question of the joint. Right? That's the trickster getting in there, going like, Balder, everything's set. Our life is set. Everything. Nobody will change. Nothing will change. I've extracted an oath out of everyone under my authority and power and threat, fear, and control if you break the oath. That nothing will change. And that's when the trickster is absolutely critical. Without the trickster, the universe really would end.
Yeah.
Right? It wouldn't just transform, it would end.
Yeah.
That's why in the Greek pantheon, Hermes is the last. I think Dionysus is maybe after him, but Hermes and Dionysus are the last gods to join the pantheon. Because you have all the organs in place, and then you need the circulatory system to basically loosen everything up and keep it moving and dynamic. So signpost for the world. And the second really is this idea of the artist as like a hierophant of the sacred. And a hierophany, what a hierophany means, epiphany, hierophany. Hiero is of God. Phany is revelation. Right. So a hierophany is a divine revelation. It's the appearance, presentation, and manifestation of the divine, i.e. of the sacred, i.e. of the archetype brought into ectype form. Right. Artist is literally the painter that takes flower and draws the millionth flower painting.
Yeah.
We still say, whoa. And the artist is a healer, but also is this revealer, is a hierophant of the sacred, is the revealer of the sacred, revealer of the archetype. And that's why art that is sacred in nature, right, has a certain quality that's different from art that is profane in nature. And then next week, I think what I'll do is I'll do a talk about the sacred and profane in art and beauty. Someone asked about the archetype of beauty. And I think that's just its own separate talk.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be a good follow-on to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, but it's interesting you brought that aspect right now, because I wanted to ask you this, is when we talk about the function of art as being, that of bringing the sacred into the world, it's also, I remember you saying this, that I was talking about all the way we suppress art and the artist archetype, and we say, oh, I'm going to resist this and I'm not going to allow it to express itself. And you said, oh, the very fact that we resist it and suppress it is a clear confirmation that it is the sacred. Art is sacred. The artist archetype is sacred. You know it because of how you suppress it. So I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to say more about that, and how would you read
well, I mean,
that?
the Muse and the hierophant, the one in you who reveals the sacred is, of course, the royal you. Right? In ancient civilizations, the high priest and the sun king or queen were one and the same. Right? The king was the chief hierophant of the society.
Yeah.
But even emperor, the emperor of Japan is still seen as like a living god.
Yes.
Right? And so when you have a feeling and a visceral sort of awareness of the artist / hierophant of the sacred within you, that is the royal you. In one of the distinctions we often use is that's the creator as opposed to the slave. And in the mechanized, profane world we live in, we're all taught to be slaves. And that's not a shaming thing. It's like, you're taught to be slaves, but you're not. You're creators, i.e. royalty.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the reasons why your bliss doesn't hurt when you don't do it right? And if you don't follow your artist self, you don't follow your meaning and purpose in life, you feel frustrated, you feel empty, you feel devoid of energy, but it doesn't actually hurt, right? The reason for that is because the part of you that shepherds and holds your bliss is royal. And royalty doesn't snivel.
Yeah.
You know, if not in this life, then we'll wait till next life. Who are we? We're going to run around urgently in fear. In fear of what? Right? The archetype is unchanged. We're just looking for our chance to stamp the egg type in this lifetime. And if you don't, and you die like a blade of grass falling under the sickle, we'll wait for the next blade. And the next blade of grass will be you too, the golden thread that we talked about.
Yeah.
You know? So there was absolutely, from that royal perspective, looking down from the mountain, there was no urgency at all. Right? It is as unpurposeful as cyclic time. Right? December, winter holiday time is of itself. It's not running away from the autumn. It's not rushing to spring. It's its own thing, and it's completely unpurposeful as cyclic time. And you still give gifts at winter holiday, or we still give Christmas gifts. We still sing the same Christmas songs over and over again. And we don't complain about that because it's not an expression. It's like you don't need to hear Jingle Bells again. You know what it sounds like. We sing it again anyway as a human function.
Yeah.
And the creation of art, the stamping of additional archetype that come out of you into archetype, painting flowers randomly for no good reason, is part of human function. It's the more royal creator human function, more the what, not the how. Right? The how is slave and profane. And profane. So anyway, it's a royal part of you that is stirred. And for your schoolmasters and taskmasters around you who are trying to train you into being the good slave horse to go carry the packs up the mountain, that's a completely unacceptable state of affairs. Right? You can't have that.
Yeah.
So they will fear, threat, and control whip you until, and because you're royal, you're smart, you read the writing on the wall and you know to stuff that part down and pretend you're a slave until you can find an escape. And then you establish your kingdom, come back and reconquer. That's when you're doing healing. You're healing from all your wounds and trauma of the whipper whipping you to sort of stuff down your artist and royal side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you say, I have wounds I need to heal. And it's like, no, just get over yourself. What kind of snowflake are you? Get back on the field, keep scoring goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put that pack back on. Right. Until you finally you're like, nobody's telling me this is okay, but I'm going to go and look for healing anyway. And then you heal, you realize your royalty. I mean, not so many words, but that's one aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then you claim your throne. You get back on your,
Yeah.
And then the artist tends to come out along with that because it's all linked.
Yeah. And you also get to talk to the whip holder and say what's going on, why you're doing this.
Oh yeah, the whip holder is in you because they're supposed to be your bodyguard.
Yeah.
But they've been twisted into whipping you.
Yeah.
All for it's all reasonable. It's all reasonable. But yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. So, would
okay.
you?
Anything else? Yeah. What else?
No. Yeah. I mean, I think I've done with the points that I wanted to share. So I wanted to ask you if you have any kind of questions or insights to share for the week.
Yeah, I think so it's 11:45. We should probably start wrapping up. But basically, the exercise that we would throw out there, I think, if you want, is to and from the chat, I think a lot of people are just firing on this anyway. Is to take some time aside, right? Sacred space holding for the artist, and to talk to it, to reflect on this, right? How are you an artist? How do you regard this? Let me ask the questions I asked you in the beginning. Let me scroll up here. How do you experience the artist archetype in you? What does she even feel like? What does she want? How does she act upon you? And how does your artist interact with the muse in you? And how does that feel? So I would say that will be the exercise to reflect on this week. And then next Sunday, I think I'll do a bit of a deeper talk on the sacred and profane in the realms of art and beauty. And we'll talk about like what art and beauty feel like when they're sacred and when they're profane. Both are valid, but there is a difference. And I think that'll be a good topic for next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't wait.
All right. So should I close the session? I should probably close the session.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gary. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. So that's it. Thank you, all of you, for like staying with us for another 2-hour session. It's so wonderful to be here in your energy and to share this space with you. I love it. I know Gary loves it. It's just fantastic. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And even if you watch on replay, that counts. People from around the world have been like, even when I watch on replay, I feel it. So it's wonderful. Even, when you watch on replay, you help amplify the sacred space. So our next session is this coming Sunday. It's free, open to everyone. Please invite other people. Put all your questions in the question area here. We'll recover them, and then we'll do a dedicated Q&A session in the next couple of weeks. And then you have your green box on the screen there if you want to sign up for the next 2 or 3 sessions. So that's it. So I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me, with us. And thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of the shared sacred space with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, free of shame, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great weekend. Have a great week. And I will see you all in the next session. Thank you. Thank you.